Hi, I'm Maggie from maggiescrochet.com, and in this video I'm going to show you one of these wonderful scarves that you see here. They're arm knitted, and I'm wearing one that I made with 2 strands of Lion Brand, so that's in a separate Lion Brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick, and that's in a separate video. This one is Premier Yarns Saturate yarn, 3 strands, but then I tell you in the video how you could actually do this with 2 strands. This one is 3 strands, no, it's 4 strands actually, of Lion Brand homespun yarn. And I think you could actually use 3 strands of this and have this come out, you know, kind of drapey like the typical ones. This one is a little bit full, but some people really like them that way, so it all depends. And one of the reasons why I do so many different ones is because that'll give you a good idea what these are going to look like finished. And I like the way the colors changed in this one, and I love the way the texture of this one. And this one was actually done with Premier Yarns Starbella, which is typically a netting yarn that you use for ruffled scarves. And this was done with Deborah Norville Serenity Chunky Yarn, 3 strands. And this was done with Starbella Luxe Yarn, which is also typically a netting yarn. And this one, I went crazy with all different kinds of yarn. And I used Eversoft, like 4 strands. And then I used Enchant. We used 3 strands of that. And actually there's 4 strands of City Life. So I just wanted to see what that would look like, and I thought the red was great to mix with the City Life, and it brought out the metallic in the yarns. So the possibilities are endless, and I'll go to close up now and I'll show you how to arm knit a scarf. Hi, I'm Maggie from maggiescrochet.com, and in this video I'm going to show you how to arm knit a scarf using Deborah Norville Saturate yarn by Premier, and this is 84% acrylic and 16% some other poly yarn. It's 92 yards or 85 meters per skein, and I'm going to use 3 skeins of this. I'm going to pull from the center. And this should be plenty to make a cowl that's probably about 6 feet long, and you sew the ends together and it'll wrap around your head one time. So you'll have like 2 loops for the cowl. This is a bulky number 5 yarn, and it is available at maggiescrochet.com, and the links to everything will be listed below the video. So let's get started. So I've got my 3 skeins here. This is my working yarn right here. I'm pulling a strand from the center of each one. Okay, then I'm going to do what's called a long tail cast on, and for that you want to measure off 3 yards. And right at the 3 yard mark, which is right here, you need to make a slip knot. This is going to be called the long tail, and this is called the working yarn. So to make the slip knot, you make a loop like this, and that strand that goes over the top gets folded in the back like this, and then it's like a circle, and then this is going halfway through the circle, and you just grab that and pull it forward. You'll notice there's a knot side and a slip side. Just pull the knot side like this, and then pull on the slip side until it fits over your hand like this, and then tighten it up just a little bit. And this will count as your first stitch for your cast on. Alright, so with the cast on yarn here, the long tail here, the working yarn here, you want to bring your hand up between the 2 like this and pull this up like this. You have 2 loops. You go on this side of this loop like that, Or some people, you might see people go like that with their whole hand. But really all you need to do is go in there with your finger and grab this loop right here. Let this loop fall down and take the new loop and put it up on your hand. That's so easy. So if you go underneath, you notice this is pretty long, and so you want to pull on your working yarn like this to tighten it up a little bit. So that's your stitch number 2 right there, and it's kind of loose so that it fits over my arm. Okay, so now the next one, you pull up like this, you go over here, pull this one, this becomes the loop that gets dropped off, and you'll notice this strand is coming from the long tail. So then you put the new loop up here, and then you need to tighten again, like that. So go under here, pull up the 2 loops, go on this side like this, and pull this loop through that loop, and let this loop drop. Put this on your hand, the new loop, like this, and then tighten underneath, like this, and then up like this, go over like this, pull this strand through, put it up on your arm. Go in like this, pull this up, go over here, pull this through like this, and put the new loop up and tighten. Pull this up like this, go through here, pull this loop through like this, let this loop drop, put the new loop up, and tighten underneath. Pull this up, go on this side of this loop, grab the loop on the opposite side, let this drop, take the new loop and put it up on your hand. So right now I have 1, you count the sets of loops as 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I am going to do this one with 9. So up, go over here, pull that strand through, let this one drop, pull the new one up on your hand and tighten. So this is what I have left in my long tail. So this I won't be using anymore. I'll sew it in at the end. So now to get started, to create row 1, this is the cast on, and now I'm going to start creating row 1. So to do that, now I'm only going to be working with the working yarn, and the long tail doesn't get used at all anymore. So right here, all I do is take the working yarn like this, hold it in this hand, and take the 3 strands as one and pull it over the working yarn like this. Let this drop off and take that new loop and put that on the opposite hand and tighten underneath. Okay, back in this hand, next loop off, next set of loops, let this drop and put the new loop over here and then tighten. And then back in here, take these loops off over here, move that up over here and tighten. Strand back over here, move this over, new loop goes over here. And always tighten after every single stitch. Okay, here, move this over to here, and tighten. This off on here, like this, new loop over here, and tighten. This here, new loop over here, and tighten. Okay, now my hand is free, and if you need to go do something, now's the time, but you still have to take these with you, or you could put them on a holder or something. But just remember what arm you took them off of, and your knit stitches are facing you, these little ovals. So that's how you would know also. Okay, so that's row 1. So now to start row 2, it's the same thing except that these loops are all going to come back over onto the opposite hand. So now I'm just going to hold this here, pull this loop off, take the new loop and put it over here and tighten. This loop off onto that, over here, and tighten. You always want to make sure you're picking up the 3 strands. This over here, new loop over here. This over here, bring it over here, and tighten. This off here, move it over here, and tighten. This off here, move it over here, and tighten. This off here, move it over here, and tighten. This off here, over here, and tighten. This yarn is so light, it feels like, it looks like wool, and it's like it's like feather light. So it keeps feeling like I don't have all the loops on my hand. Okay, so that is the end of row 2. So that's what that looks like. So now you would just go back to the other arm and take the loops off like this. So you continue doing that, and I would just keep going until these skeins run out. And just before you run out though, you want to make sure that you have the same 3 yards to bind off that you had to cast on. So you want to make sure that you stop in plenty of time so that you have enough yarn at the end. So I'm going to continue making this scarf, and then at the very end I'll come back when I have 3 yards left and I'll show you how to bind off. So that's row 3 completed. So that's what that looks like. So continue on with your scarf, and I'll do the same, and I'll be back on camera to show you how to bind off and then how to connect the sides together. So I'm ready to bind off my Saturate arm knitted scarf, and I have a few details to give you about this scarf. We cast on 9 stitches, and we use 3 skeins of Saturate, and this is like 7 feet long. I have somebody help me arm knit these, and she made it very long, and even with it being this long, we landed up with this much yarn left over. So I'm thinking that if you would want to cast on the 9 stitches and only use 2 skeins of Saturate and wind it so that you have 3 strands, you'd have to figure out how to wind that. I think you can get like a 5-foot scarf out of 2 skeins. So that would be a good plan. Or you could, if you wanted a little bit wider scarf, because this is kind of, it's so light and airy that you might want to cast on maybe 10, 11 stitches instead of 9, or even 12 stitches, and have a wider scarf, and it would come up shorter from the 3 skeins. So anyway, that's just your choice on what you want to do. So right now I landed up on this side for my bind off, and I could switch all these loops over to the opposite arm if I was more comfortable binding off over there. So, and it doesn't matter which side you bind off from, that doesn't make any difference in your pattern. But anyway, now to bind off, I need to knit 2 stitches. So I would just move this stitch over here like I've been doing, but just do 2. Like this, over here, like that. And then I take the previous loop and I move it over the new loop to bind off. So this one's the bound off stitch right here, and I just drop it. Then I pick up my working yarn like this, and I knit the next stitch over to the opposite hand like that. Tighten, take the previous loop, move it over the new loop, and let that loop drop. Pick up my working yarn, knit the next stitch over to the opposite arm like that. Move the previous loop over the new loop like this and let that drop. Pick up my working yarn, knit this stitch over to the opposite arm like this, pull, move the previous loop over the new loop like this and let it drop, and that one's bound off. Pick up my working yarn, knit this stitch over to this hand like this, take the previous loop, move it over the new loop and let that drop. Pick up my working yarn, knit the next stitch, move it over here, tighten, take the previous loop, move it over the new loop and let that drop. Knit the next stitch off like this, move that over here, tighten, take the previous loop, move it over the new loop and let it drop. Pick up my working yarn, knit off the next stitch like that, move that over here, tighten, take the previous loop, move it over the new loop, and that's, now I'm down to the last one. So on the last one, I just take my strand. If it's really long, you can cut it to like maybe 18 inches. So then I'm going to take my remaining yarn here, and I'm going to bring that, all that yarn here through the last loop like this, all the way through. Then I'm going to pull on this, not super tight, but just like that. And if I wanted to make fringe, so now it's completely bound off and your arms are free. And if I want to make fringe, what I would do is to just take my leftover yarn, take the 3 strands since I have them, or 2 or 1 or whatever you want to do. And then I would find something the length of the fringe I want. And for me, it's this little notebook here, like this. And I like this length right here. So I would just wind my yarn around. So you could find a piece of cardboard, or even the lengthwise of a checkbook would work. And you just wind it around like this. And then you just want to cut one side of the strands like this. Okay, so then you don't need this anymore, and you just decide how many strands you want to use. Let's say I want to use 6. Oh, I pulled up the wrong strands. Okay, these. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So I'm going to pull these, and I'm going to do them on each side, and I want the knit side facing up, and the knit side has these ovals, and the purl side looks different over here. So I want the right side facing up, and I'm going to take the folded yarn like this, and I'm going to put the fold from front to back through my first stitch there on the end. Then I'm going to take all the strands and bring them through the fold like this. And then when I tug on it a little bit, I have that nice little bar there. And I could also just grab this strand and put it through the fringe so I don't have to sew that end in. So I would just pull that all the way through and then just trim it. So you do the same with the fringes all the way across, and just put a little bit of fringe or a lot of fringe, whatever you want to do. So that's how you would fringe it and have a scarf instead of a cowl. Now if you want a cowl, you want to make sure the scarf is all on the same side. So, and we want to be, actually, once you get the knit side, or you could have the purl side facing up, you want to kind of flip it over so that you have the purl side on the facing up because you're going to sew it together on the purl side. So it'll be kind of like the wrong side. Okay, so this is an example. Sometimes when I get ready to sew my ends together, I'll be sewing the cast-on stitches to the bind-off stitches, and sometimes these ends here land up on the same side, and this is an example where they're ending up on the opposite side. But either way works, it's fine. So I like to just sew them together with my hand. You could use like a big safety pin or a big weaving needle, however you wanna, whatever you're most comfortable with. And I just discovered this new technique where I just take, like I'm working on the last stitch here and the end stitch here, and now I'm gonna take this yarn end and just push it through like this. I'm gonna push through a loop like this. Then I'm gonna take my working yarn here and pull that all the way through that loop I just created. And that makes like a half of a knot, kind of. It's like a, see how it just makes like a little knot there? So I think that's really good for sewing this together. So you just continue down matching up the stitches, and I like to just pull a loop out like that and then pull the working strand through that knot. Or if you're more comfortable, just whip stitch it, you know, around. But basically you go all the way down to the end, and then you weave this end back in too. So that's how you make an arm knitted scarf using Premier's Deborah Norville Saturate yarn. And I hope that you enjoyed the video, and make sure you watch all the other arm knitting videos we have and tips. And I hope that you subscribe to our channel, and thank you very much for watching. So I hope that you enjoyed your arm knitting lesson. If you have any questions or comments, just write them below, and please subscribe to our channel, and make sure that you watch all of our tips and all of the other arm knitting scarves and Afghan videos. Thank you very much for watching. Yarn back over here, and I'm going to knit off one more stitch like this, put it over here, tighten over the whole strand of yarn, and then pull that strand of yarn all the way through. And then just for extra security,